This is Goku Sun DBZ, and welcome back for a new episode of Best to Worst. Now, with that said, for this episode, we're going to do something special, and I hope you appreciate the Super Nintendo music in the background from the original Mega Man X game, one of my favorite 16-bit soundtracks. With that said, this Best to Worst list is very special. It's about the game console generations. I will be ranking, in my opinion, the weakest to the strongest of console generations, and I will mention a few consoles from that generation. With that said, there are 8 console generations so far, and also, with that said, and I will be basing it mostly off of consoles I have gotten a chance, either I own or I've played for a friend or something. So with that said, in 8th place is the first console generation, in my opinion, the weakest generation. Though it had a lot of importance, 2 specific consoles stand out from Generation 1. And that is the Magnavox Odyssey 2. Also, of course, probably the most infamous, the Atari 2600. These are 2 specific consoles that stand out from the first generation. But in my opinion, it's still the weakest generation by far. Coming in 7th place is the second generation. Now, a few consoles specifically that stand out from this generation, some you may have heard, some you may not. First up, the Atari 5200, which is by far the worst Atari console. Probably also has to do with being probably the worst game controller just about ever made. And also from the generation, the ColecoVision, the Intellivision, were basically improved versions of like Atari, more or less. Closer to arcade ports, especially like, I believe it's the ColecoVision was considered better. And the very first Sega console, which was released exclusively in Japan in the second generation. That is called the SG-1000. A very rare and very hard to find Sega console for collectors, speaking as a Sega collector. It's pretty pricey, especially since you have to get import from Japan. Coming in 6th place, the third console generation. A few specific consoles that stand out from this generation are the original Nintendo, or NES, of course, the Sega Master System, the first worldwide released Sega console, and I feel highly underrated console at that. I actually like the Sega Master System over the original NES, though the NES may have some more memorable games. If you're a on-rail shooter fan like myself, old school on-rail shooters and things of that kind, an RPG fan and beat 'em ups and stuff, you go with the Sega Master System. Specifically, I like its port of, even though it's not great, still like the original Double Dragon. The original Phantasy Star is a very memorable 8-bit JRPG. Also from this generation was the Atari 7800, which was backwards compatible with 2600 games. So really, the Atari 7800 was the very first backwards compatible game console, way before any other console thought about doing something like that. It was the first. Last is probably one of the least well-known game consoles ever done. It was a very limited run console. It had came with its own screen and stuff, so it's a pretty small screen. It's kind of cool though, given it had a built screen / console, so you couldn't plug it up to a TV or anything. And this console had a very limited run. Its total lifespan was just over a year, and it only had some like 28 games released for it. But it was a special type of console. It was farther advanced from anything else in the late 80s. Well, mid-80s or late 80s. It's called the Vectrex. And if you don't know much about, check out Classic Game Room's review of the Vectrex from Lord Carnage. It's a pretty cool looking console in all honesty. I've even got a chance at a retro game convention to try one out somebody had plugged up and played. The Vectrex is actually a pretty cool and unique console, one of the most interesting I've ever seen. Coming in fifth place is the fourth generation, which most people would probably regard the fourth generation as the best generation console, but this is my own personal list, of course. So with that said, in fifth place is the fourth generation. Some of the best and some less well-known consoles from this generation are as followed. The TurboGrafx 16, which was the only regular console, specifically in America, that you could play the original Street Fighter on, known, though renamed for some reason on the TurboGrafx, called Fighting Street. Also coming out this generation, you had the Neo Geo, the Philips CDI, which I've actually never gotten to play either of them. I've got to play a Neo Geo arcade machine, and it's quite an experience. But they have some pretty memorable games, these consoles. Specifically the Neo Geo, because of having games like, of course, Art of Fighting, obviously games such as Metal Slug, also games like Fatal Fury, Samurai Showdown, and many others. Also from this generation was the Sega Genesis, of course the Sega Genesis add-ons, the Sega 32X, and the Sega CD. And, of course, a lot of people regard as maybe the best console, obviously from this generation, was the SNES, SNES, Super Nintendo. Coming in and fourth place is the seventh generation of game consoles, which are as follow: the Nintendo Wii, the Nintendo Wii U, the PlayStation 3, and the Xbox 360. Great generation. That was last gen, of course. Personally, so far playing game-wise, I actually have to say I like the Nintendo Wii U more than the Wii, which is something to say. But of Wii U games I've got to play so far, I've had more fun with the Wii U than I did with the original Wii. So that's kind of cool. So, good job. Wii U is actually, I'm starting to think, maybe one of the, if not the most underrated Nintendo console. Interesting. Did not expect that when I first picked one up about 2 months back. I did not expect to like the Wii U as much as I actually have. With that said, also, of course, the PS3 and the 360 was a great console rivalry. Both platforms push each other to come out with great games from that generation. I mean, you had incredible fighting games, like, of course, Street Fighter 4. You had games like Tekken Tag Tournament 2 from that gen. Soul Calibur 4 was pretty good. Soul Calibur 5, not so much. Assassin's Creed, that's one of the key franchises coming out of that generation. Demon's Souls, Dark Souls, the Soulsborne franchise, really, thanks to the PS3, since Demon's Souls was exclusive. And many other great games from that era. Next up, coming in third place, is the 8th generation. That's this generation. Now, I've only played 2 of the 3 consoles from this generation. Haven't played the Nintendo Switch, of course, but that is part of this generation. But why is it so high? There are a few really specific games on the Xbox One that I really like Sunset Overdrive. Actually, Halo Wars 2 is a lot of fun. And many other great games. And also on the PS4 side, God of War. Probably other specific games I have to mention, obviously, from this generation. Of course, now having Kingdom Hearts 3 and Street Fighter 5 is really good. I mean, this generation, PS4 is solid. And that's more so why the 8th generation is in third place. Coming in second place is the 5th generation, which had a lineup of good games, or game consoles as well, shall I say. And coming out this generation was known as, one was called the CD32, Amiga CD32, which is a pretty unknown console. I've never actually got a chance, but there are people that talk pretty highly of that console. Also from this generation, the Commodore 64. Also, the Atari Jaguar, a console, of course, a few years back I got hold of, which I really like. The Panasonic 3DO, great console, underrated console of the generation, as well as, of course, the Sega Saturn, a great, incredible 2D fighting game powerhouse of a console, and also the Panzer Dragoon games on that console as well. Of course, the Nintendo 64, which has well-known favorites such as games you may or may not have heard of, little games such as Star Fox 64, Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, Banjo-Kazooie, Mario 64, of course, Pokemon Stadium 1 and 2, GoldenEye, Perfect Dark, and of course, the last of this generation was the original PlayStation, the PSX. Spyro. Of other consoles or games from that console, of course, probably might know of the Tekken series got its start there. You have, of course, the Twisted Metal franchise, Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 9, and many other incredible games. Metal Gear Solid, Spyro the Dragon, Crash Bandicoot, Tomba, Parappa the Rapper. Many great games and consoles from that gen. Coming in first place is the 6th generation, which is one hell of a generation of game consoles. And these are as followed. The Nintendo GameCube, with incredible games such as Star Wars, Rogue Leader, Rogue Squadron 2, such as The Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, or how about Pokemon Colosseum, Metroid Prime, Pokemon XD. Also from this generation, the original Xbox, with games like Panzer Dragoon Orta, Jade Empire, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2, Jet Set Radio Future, Dead or Alive 3, and the list goes on and on. Oh yeah, Fable. Next console, the third of 4 specific consoles from this generation, the PlayStation 2, the juggernaut that still to this day holds the #1 spot as the best-selling console at that gen. Great, solid games. Tekken Tag Tournament on its launch. Tekken 4, Tekken 5, Soul Calibur 2, Soul Calibur 3. I mean, it's ridiculous, the games. The Devil May Cry trilogy. If you want to go other games, how about Final Fantasy X? Final Fantasy 12? Or how about a little game series got its start called Kingdom Hearts 2, Kingdom Hearts Re-Chain of Memories, and too many other games to name on that console. And of course, the last but not least, from this generation, the Sega Dreamcast, with incredible games such as Shenmue, such great games like Dead or Alive 2, Crazy Taxi. How about games such as Project Justice, Street Fighter 3 Double Impact, Street Fighter 3 Third Strike, Legend of Kain, Soul Reaver, Soul Calibur 1, Marvel vs. Capcom 1, Marvel vs. Capcom 2, Resident Evil Code Veronica. How about a game known as Cannon Spike, or a game that is regarded as one of the greatest JRPGs of all time in my opinion from this console, Skies of Arcadia. Easily one of the most underrated JRPGs ever to be made. Hands down, there are not many games, and Dreamcast still holds a special place in my opinion, is still the second best game console of all time. only behind the original PlayStation, in my opinion. But yes, the 6th generation comes in at number one of, in my opinion, of the 8 console generations. But tell me, which is your favorite console generation? What is your favorite console from that generation? With that said, this is Goku Sun DBZ, and I'll see you all next time. And I hope you enjoyed the Mega Man X 16-bit music in the background. See you next time.